Kharkiv, Vienna, Paris, with support from Adamadios Korais. He became the first professor of medicine in the newly established Ethniko Panepistemio of National University of Greece in 1837. And he was King Odo's personal physician. And he created the first health legislation in Greece and is considered the founder of the medical system of liberated Greece. Among other studies, he wrote the pharmacology, a pharmacy guide that was used for decades. Next. We all know about blood donation and blood transfusion in Greece. It was established by two Hyotes. Next. The Mathios Makas, 1879, died in 1965, medical doctor and hematologist, founder and organizer of the blood donation service for the Greek Red Cross in 1935. And he served at Bonn University. He is considered the father of blood donation in Greece. And during World War II, he introduced portable wooden blood freezers that were used in the Greek-Albanian front and saved countless lives. Real pioneer. And the next, Mr. Mikes Paidousis, he was also a medical doctor and hematologist and was born in Kambos, co-founder with Mr. Makas of the, and first director of the blood donation service in the Greek Red Cross. And in 1939, he performed the first blood transfusion with preserved blood in Greece. First time that was ever done in Greece. And received the the Medal for Distinguished Service and the Hellenic War Cross. So, as you can see, there was a very strong presence in the medical field in pioneering technologies by Hyotes, not only in Greece, but as we saw in other parts of the world with the statistical work on epidemiology that was done in this country in Boston. Now, you might ask what about the mathematical and physical sciences. We don't have time to go through a lot of these, but I will show you a prime example. I forgot about this is not first one that I will talk about is Dimitris Pikionis, who was architect, artist, and academician. His parents were Hyotes, the first Greek architect to support the view that architecture is art and poetry. And he had a famous saying, what we do has to be beautiful as well. The scorpion, for instance, is completely self-sufficient and perfect from a constructional point of view, yet we humans think it disgusting and unnecessary despite its constructional perfection. In other words, architecture has to be also beautiful. He was famous for his preservation work around the Acropolis and a prolific writer, wrote many scientific articles. And in 1966, he was elected a member of the Academy of Athens. Next is Charalambos Bouras, who I guess who is still alive. Architect, archaeological architecture. He studied architecture in Thessaloniki and Paris, and he was a professor of history of architecture until the year 2000. And he has supervised the restoration of the Acropolis temples for the past 37 years. And those of you who have been to the Acropolis have seen some of the terrific restoration work that has been done. Well, it's due to Hyote. In 2003, he was awarded the Commander of the Order of the Phoenix by the President of the Hellenic Republic for the exceptional work on Acropolis. Next, let's talk about a mathematician. Many of you may have heard the name of Karatheodori, Constantine Karatheodori, 1873 to 1950. He was a mathematician. His mother Despota Petropokinou came from the well-known family in Chios. Great contributions to the theory of real variable functions, calculus of variations, and measure theory. You might say, what does that mean? Well, if you are a mathematician, and I meant Mrs. Komidas' son, who is a mathematician earlier today, I'm sure he knows about all these theorems. Carathéodory's theorem for convex hull, measure theory, existence theorem, extension theorem, a veritable source of innovation which is part of mathematics, of the history of mathematics. Furthermore, next, he was a source of inspiration and actually helped many of his colleagues. Einstein had said that Carathéodoris provided the mathematics that made his general theory of relativity possible. Minkowski, Hilbert, Klein, Schwartz, all of these people are of course, very, very famous mathematicians. Maybe you don't know them. Those of us who have worked in the physical sciences and mathematics, those are household words in that field. In the next slide, however, as you will see, he went beyond that. He introduced the axiomatic formulation of thermodynamics, which is an expression of the second law of thermodynamics along a purely geometrical approach. I'm sure those of you who took physics in college and were tortured by thermodynamics, you probably remember the second law of thermodynamics and how it is to be understood, where Carathéodoris made a totally mathematical formulation of that law, which, when I was a freshman, I guess not a freshman, but maybe my third year in college, studying thermodynamics, in Sommerfeld's book, another famous mathematician, physicist, he had the Carathéodory principle, which I remember working my way through. And his statement of the second law is known as principle of Carathéodory. With his formulation, he described the concept of adiabatic accessibility. Adiabatic is another sacred word in thermodynamics, and provided the foundation for the new subfield of classical thermodynamics that's often called geometrical thermodynamics. Next. In 1919, Eleftherios Venizelos invited him to submit a plan for the creation of the Ionian University at Smyrna, and Carathéodory was appointed in 1920 the dean of the university and helped in establishing a modern institution which, however, never got to admit students because of the catastrophe of Smyrna in 1922. Carathéodory barely managed to save himself and parts of the library, and he was rescued at the last moment. He brought many university books to Athens, and he stayed until 1924 teaching at the university and Polytechnio as well. He was a member of the Academy of Athens since he was founded in 1924. So, as you can see, the Hyotes, since the liberation, have been principals in several areas, and we only covered a few of these. Next slide, please. I have to say something to complement what Dr. Loss said about naval science, only to point out that this is the bridge from the Titanic, and things have changed since then. Next, as you will see, the bridge on a modern ship looks more like a page out of NASA. Next, this is some of the stuff that I look at in my work. And a modern ship bridge, it looks pretty much like a control center for mission control from a NASA program. But what does that have to do with anything, you might say? Next. Once upon a time, a capitanius was relatively simple, being a capitanius. Now, it takes a scientist to make a captain or a professional in shipping. Go on, please. Chios, of course, continues to be, as we heard, the heart of Greece's naval activity. And we have the University of the Aegean, where there is the Department of Shipping, Trade and Transport. It is based in Chios, and of course it doesn't have a building commensurate with its importance, but they offer mathematics, computer science, advanced statistics, informatics, and among the courses offered in these are undergraduate programs, but they also have a graduate program and a PhD program that are offered. Now you might ask, do they do research? Are they any good? Is there any proof of that? And as you will see, in terms of research award, in 2006 they were awarded the Lloyd's List Award for Maritime Innovation in the Floating Autonomous Desalinization Unit Program. This is a platform where they essentially, it's a desalinization plant, it's a desalination plant that, of course, takes sea and transforms it into sweet, drinkable water. So they were distinguished for that. And also the Regio Stars Award in 2008 on energy efficiency, renewable energies on the floating desalinization unit program. And they have indeed obtained patents, international patents, for this technology. And system for energy recovery and reduction in deposits on membrane surfaces in various power plants, reverse osmosis desalinization systems. So in a very competitive field with powerhouses around the world in many, many areas, you have a small department on HEOS that carries on tradition in technologies that have to do, of course, with our nautical tradition. So next slide in summary then, and let me point out the following next. So HEOS' ancient tradition in learning and innovation was continuous through and after the liberation of 1912. I tried to point that out with a few examples, that we don't have time for a lot of those. Renowned doctors, architects, artists, mathematicians evolved from the diaspora as well as from the island. And we saw examples of the diaspora. But always excelled on the Greek as well as the world stage. They contributed to Greece, they contributed to the world. Also, in this talk, we have only highlighted a few of the scientists who have passed on, but there exists a plethora of academicians, professors, researchers who are contributors to science and technology and innovation on every continent. And in my travels for meetings, I meet people everywhere who are of Hellenic descent. Two examples, I limit myself, I don't know how many of you know Aristides Patrinos. He managed the Human Genome Project. You all remember that 10 years ago that was a big deal, how to map the human genome. And the management of the whole activity was at the Department of Energy. They coordinated all the work from the National Institutes of Health, from private companies and so on. Aristides Patrinos was the person who managed that whole activity, and with a very successful result. Then he became president of Human Genomics Incorporated, etc., etc. And of course, Nicholas Vengroponte, Mrs. Strataitis mentioned that, and we are honored to have his brother here, who is the co-founder and first director of the MIT Media Laboratory, celebrated author, and the originator of one laptop per child. I'm sure many of you have heard that, and how he has managed to make laptops very cheap and distribute them throughout the third world. So, this pursuit of excellence, Troy and Aristotelian were first enunciated in Homer's Iliad, and befits, I think appropriately, the essence and the spirit of Hellenics throughout the ages, wherever they may reside or grow up. Thank you very much.
we heard from the master. Thank you so much. It may have sounded a little parochial, but this is the purpose of having a 100-year commemoration of the liberation of the island, of course, the founding of our society. I warned you at lunch that you're going to have a drop-off, and that's me now having to close out this symposium. I'd like to congratulate all of you, first for your patience, secondly for your tenacity to be here. And I'm going to speak about Hellenism and the American experience. Starting from the ancient times, Greeks have always been restless, always attracted by the seductiveness of the unknown. From ancient times, they just like to move out and explore new lands. Regardless of how far we trace the origin of the Hellenic race, the Greeks were, so to speak, international immigrants. Long before America was discovered, Greek colonies flourished in Asia Minor, the Black Sea, Sicily, Africa, Spain, and Russia, based on the belief that the initial source of knowledge was the unknown. The Greeks always reached for the unexplored. As they sailed to foreign lands in their own oldest continuous search for the unknown, the Greeks wrote history without realizing it. It is evident, therefore, that deep inside the Greek mind, whether it is 2,000 years ago, yesterday, or even today, the basic motive that instigated exploration has been the constant thirst for the unknown. This is a basic trait of the Hellenic race. Now, I must point out, however, that the wide dispersion of Greeks all over the ancient world should not be confused with the mass migration to the New World the last 2 centuries. Although the inane urge for the adventure and the unknown has always been there, the principal reasons for thousands of Greeks immigrating during the period of the last century and a half were strictly economic. Now, who were the first Greeks who reached North America? There are several versions. The first one has Christopher Columbus himself, on the assumption that he was a member of a noble Genovese family living in Chios when the island was under Genovese rule. Another version refers to one by the name of Juan Griego, who was a crewman in Columbus's second expedition. The third, which is probably the most credible, gives this distinction to one by the name of Don Theodoro or Theodoros, who was a seaman with the Spanish explorer Narvaez in October 1538, way back. Narvaez anchored off Pensacola, Florida to get fresh water. One of the crewmen, Theodoros, and an African went ashore as hostages to the Indians. Neither of them ever returned. Now, the first substantial arrival of Greeks in America occurred 120 years later, in 1768, when about 500 Greeks from Peloponnesus, together with another 1,000 Italians and Minorcans, arrived in the northeast coast of Florida. They went as indentured workers to establish a British colony for a fellow by the name of Scottish doctor, Andrew Turnbull. Turnbull was married to the daughter of a Greek merchant from Smyrna. In honor of his wife, Turnbull decided to name the colony Smyrna, which is still around today. Unfortunately, New Smyrna turned out to be a disaster of mismanagement. Malaria and bad food led to the death of half the workers in less than 2 years. The colony was abandoned, and the remnants, including about 100 Greeks, went to nearby St. Augustine, and most of them married Italian and Minorcas in the Catholic Church. These early Greeks disappeared and left no trace. This is significant when I go into the future of Hellenism. Now, the Greek War of Independence marked a new movement of Hellenes towards the United States when orphans from the massacre years of 1822, and I believe Dr. Krivizis referred to that at one point, and other parts of Greece were rescued from by American missionaries and brought to this country for adoption. Then around the middle of the 19th century, another group of Hellenes, a lot of them from the island of Chios, appeared in the American scene. These people were merchants who traveled to New York, Boston, and New Orleans to set up their export-import business. And in 1864, Nicholas Benakis, together with some other merchants, established in New Orleans, the first Greek Orthodox Church, Holy Trinity. This is the oldest Greek church in the Western Hemisphere. I must point out, however, that neither the Greeks of New Smyrna, nor the war orphans, or the Greek merchants were instrumental in the establishment of the Greek American community as we know it today. This distinction belongs to the poor, uneducated immigrants who came to this country from the villages of rural Greece. The first wave of Greek immigrants took place during a 30-year period. The last 10 years of the 19th century and the first 20 years of this century. During that period, no less than 400,000 Hellenes, mostly from Peloponnesus, came to America. The reasons were economic. The voyages to the United States lasted anywhere from 20 to 45 days. The conditions aboard the ships were just miserable. Passengers stayed cramped together in filthy cabins and had to sustain humiliating and unhealthy conditions. These people, once in America, crossed the line from myth to reality. Migration to this country by those Greeks was a profound cultural shock that took years for them to overcome. They were faced with a strong anti-foreign climate, unable to speak the language, no skills, no education, no friends. Unfortunately, they were the victims of exploitation by unscrupulous Americans, as well as Greeks who had established themselves in this country. Hard work, patience, and persistence to survive and produce eventually brought redemption. The Depression years of 1930 to 40 set back the Greek Americans and their advance to the middle class. They worked long and hard hours to simply survive and preserve what they had made. My parents, among this group, suffered like the rest of them. I will never forget some of the horrible depression stories my mother used to tell me. Now, following the Second World War, new immigration laws allowed new waves of Greek immigrants to come to the United States. And this is very significant. Between the end of World War II and 1965, some 70,000 Greeks came to this country. Further changes to the immigration laws in 1965 increased the flow of immigrants even more. Most of them came to join relatives, others to study in American universities, and some just simply jumped ship. Now that's very significant for most of us here today, because we we belong to that group. Now these people, however, were better educated and more well off than their predecessors that had come 80 years earlier. And there was also more balance between men and women. Now most of those who came here, who were students, did not return back to Greece. And by doing so, they established an immigrant professional class, and this provided a new dimension to the Greek American community. This fresh wave replenished Hellenism in America and gave new vitality to the old Greek American institutions. Unfortunately, following the decade of the 1970s, immigration from Greece tapered off, with only 25,000 people coming to America. And that's about the story of immigration from Greece. Let's take a look now at the makeup of the Greek American population as we see it today. It could be divided into three categories. One, those who came before the Second World War or shortly afterwards. That would be a group of the first immigrants. My father came to this country in July 1910. My mother 10 years later. Then those who came after the 1950s and later. And the last one is, of course, the American-born Greeks. So we have those three groups. Now I would like to spend a few minutes to discuss the social personality of this ethnic group. And I will start with the church. It is the church where the Greek Americans would go to worship, attain social recognition, and make friends, or sometimes enemies. Through the church, new generations share a common destiny with the older generation. For the American-born, the church community identifies with Hellenic ethnicity. As expected, the language in the church has become a major issue. The old generation regard the church as the repository of national identity through the Greek language. The American-born, on the other hand, desire a church open to all baptized Orthodox, irrespective of nationality, with English as the universal language during the liturgy and the services. Now, the next group would be the national societies, as well as several professional, educational, and trade associations that constitute a very important segment of the Greek American social structure. As early as 1907, there were 100 of them. Today, there must be thousands. In these associations, first and second generation Greek Americans have an opportunity to meet fellow countrymen or colleagues, work towards common objectives, organize public events, and most importantly, become socially recognized. Together with the church, they serve as another conduit to satisfy the people's social, religious, professional, or business aspirations. Among them, of course, IHEPA is the most influential and nationally known Greek-American association. Next comes the Greek-American Press. In addition to maintaining a link with the motherland by way of news reports, it also plays a significant role in preserving, to some extent, the ethnic consciousness of the Greek-American society. On national issues, the Turkish invasion of Cyprus mobilized and unified the Greek-American community as never before, and its byproduct has been the establishment of the Greek Club in Washington, which is a coalition of various Greek-American groups trying to influence American foreign policy. Finally, if we were to look upon the achievements of this minuscule minority of men and women in this country, the Hellenic American community, as they work, strive, and compete with their American counterparts in such areas of human endeavor as business, government and politics, the arts, medicine and science, literature, and even sports, we will conclude that their achievements are quite remarkable, particularly since the Greek-American community represents less than 0.5% of the American population. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a bird's eye view of the Hellenic experience in America. If I was to go into all those accomplishments, it would take another 30 minutes. So, before I conclude, however, I would like to engage with you in some reflections about the future of the Greek-American community. First, let's look at the numbers. By now, all of the early immigrants are gone. Their children, such as me, are either also gone or in their late 70s and 80s. The third generation is in their late 40s and 50s, and the fourth generation now in their late teens or early 20s. A substantial number of the thousands, however, who came after the Second World War are still around, most of us here. Also, their children or grandchildren are considerably younger than the offspring of the original immigrants. Now, on the other hand, the early and post-Second War immigrants have not been replacing themselves for the last 40 years. Without new immigration in sight and no rise in the birth rate, the Greek-American population would probably shrink in the next several decades. For those of us who are left then, and those who would be our progeny, who will be their ethnic identity? And we are talking about several decades from now. There are basically two theories. One is that all Greek Americans are an extension of the homeland, an homogenian, a Hellenic diaspora. The other is that Greek Americans are descendants of immigrants who are now participants in American history. Now, under the first version, the presumption is that all Greeks in America share a common destiny with other Greeks living outside the United States. Their cultural values and political sensitivities must be nourished by contemporary Greek realities. Under the second approach, American-born Greeks cannot regard themselves as transplanted Greeks or Greeks of diaspora, but rather as an indigenous participant in the multicultural mosaic of American society. Perhaps a more realistic approach would be to look upon the interaction of various social forces upon the Greek immigrants and the American-born generations. As these forces both look and move back and forth in relation to the daily American experiences, they generate new forms of ethnic consciousness, an ongoing process of what I would like to call ethnogenesis. Under the ethnogenetic approach, maintaining a sense of Greek ethnicity is not an issue of ingrained sentiment, but only of voluntary selection. We must accept that the third and fourth generation of Greek Americans have the weakest link to ancestral culture. Therefore, their Greek ethnicity, if it is to exist at all, will depend on their voluntary participation in Greek American religious and institutional life. The new brand of Hellenism in America should not be confused with that of the homeland. The Greek elements of the American-born are Christian orthodoxy within the framework of American religious pluralism, and also all country food and music, and perhaps some broken Greek. Unless these links are preserved, kept among these people, and assuming that there is no future immigration from Greece, future generations of Greek Americans would simply disappear in the manner experienced by those early Greek settlers of New Smyrna. In any event, I would say that the story of the Greek American community is not over yet. As of now, I believe the American-born Greeks, in their deepest inclinations of what? Religious approach, social preferences, sentiment for family,